Hello and welcome. This is the debate for the Leominster City Council Ward 5 seat. The candidates are incumbent Peter Angelini and challenger Carrie Noseworthy. First on the ballot in order is Councillor Angelini, so he will get the first question. The current administration, with the support of the City Council, has made it a de facto budget policy to set aside at least 10% of the city budget into the stabilization fund. In past elections, some have praised this strategy as sound fiscal policy, while some have called it overkill. Do you support continuing to allocate at least 10% of revenues each year into the stabilization fund, which already has a balance of over $20 million, or do you think these funds could be better utilized elsewhere? Mr. Angelini, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Kevin. I certainly do approve of increasing the stabilization fund or taking 10%. The Department of Revenue actually recommends a 16% stabilization fund, which would put us closer to $26 million. So you're correct, we have over $20 million in stabilization now, and quite often stabilization fund is used as, we borrow money from stabilization. For instance, the city is a grant recipient for several $1 million. We have to spend the money and we're reimbursed after the work is done, the grant work. So we borrow money from stabilization to do the work, and then we get the reimbursement from the grant, and we put that money back in stabilization. So it's a very important tool for the city to capitalize on opportunities as they present themselves in the grant world. And as you know, we have probably the premier grant administrator in the state in Wendy Weeks. So she keeps us pretty busy, and she does a fantastic job. So yes, I would continue to be an advocate for increasing the stabilization fund up to $26 million if we possibly could. It certainly helps our bond rating as well. And when we just built the new police station, $32 million. We didn't have to go out for debt exclusion. The city has a tremendous bond rating that gives us the ability to borrow at a very attractive interest rate, and therefore the debt service is under control. And I tip my hat to the financial team, comptroller, treasurer, do an outstanding job for us as well. So definitely a big fan of stabilization, and I would increase it to if I had the opportunity.
Good. Ms. Noseworthy.
Great, thank you so much for that question. I think that obviously it's great that we have so much money in the stabilization unit. It's about, I think, $23 million at this point. I know that the state only recommends actually that we put 5 to 7% in the stabilization fund, but we're, in this great place. I don't like to sort of say what I would do every single year, including this year, without looking and seeing what the budget landscape looks like, what the needs look like. We've just been through a flood. So I would say that I would approach things uniquely each year. I think it's great that we are in the financial state that we're in, again, with the bond rating. However, I do think, like in a few years when the ARPA funds run out and the Student Opportunity Act slows down a little bit, that we don't want to find ourselves in the same place that we found ourselves in 2016, and that we should just take each year as it comes.
Okay. So now I'm going to open up the floor to direct candidate interaction for up to 5 minutes if you'd like to continue talking about the subject. One of the things I did hear is you said the state recommends 16%. You said
that's
the
correct.
State recommends 5 to 7%, so I don't know if you want to address that at all.
I'm certainly comfortable with my number. It's on the DOR website. And I think it's also important to note when you're talking about stabilization, we have been fortunate to have experienced the greatest economic expansion in decades. And now you see a rising interest rate environment, and you've inverted yield curve in the bond market, which 80% of the time indicates a recession is just around the corner. So it's a great time to have that stabilization fund if we experience that downturn that a lot of economists are predicting. And that will give us the ability to manage to get a soft landing for the city of Leominster. Your revenue stream may become a little lighter. Your ability to collect real estate taxes sometimes gets challenged in those type of environments. So I think it's a positive.
I still stand by what I said initially. I do think that it depends on the financial year and what it, brings to bear. Looking back again to that 2016 timeline to where we were with our public school systems, where we had to let so many teachers go. We are not in that place now because we have the buffer of the ARPA funds and because we have the buffer of the Student Opportunity Act. And so we've got a nice cushion. However, we're not going to have that forever, and I just think that it's more fiscally responsible to sort of look at each year and see what it brings, and then decide whether or not how much we want to put in that stabilization fund in advance.
Well, oftentimes when people see a large sum of money sitting there, they try to find ways to spend it. And I'm not a proponent, I never have been, that you throw money at a problem to solve it. So I think it does us justice in the people of the community. It's like if you run a family budget, you want to have money put aside in case you run into some kind of difficulty, an unforeseen tragedy, or an illness. And that's how I see the stabilization fund.
Sure, and I appreciate that analogy. I know that everyone is struggling right now, regardless. So we all understand what it's like to, how great of a feeling it is to have more money, set aside and to be able to spend it. But I do feel that it is a different fiscal road to go down when you're planning for the city in its entirety.
We're all experiencing,
Go ahead.
we're all experiencing the effects of rampant inflation. The city's no exception. And families are struggling due to rising food costs. I think we're going to see home heating oil approaching $5 a gallon this winter. So again, the city's costs are affected by inflation as well. So our health insurance is going to increase, all the electricity. So all of our costs are going to rise as well. So managing the stabilization fund and like I said, it's really key so that we can borrow money from stabilization, go out and take advantage of these grants. I mean, I think we have one that's all teed up from Manusnaug Brook, the area behind the old woodblock to redevelop that whole causeway. And that's like $4.5 million. So we wouldn't be able to do projects like that without the stabilization fund in the position that it is. And I think in the long term, it's a significant positive benefit to residents of the city.
Anything else from either of you on this subject, or would like to move on?
I just wanted to briefly add that I know that we had money set aside for the Manusnaug Dam and other projects in advance of the 9/11 floods, and I think it's really important that when we do have money set aside or promised to us from the state, that we move forward in those situations. That way, we don't find ourselves in crisis situations where we need to pull too much from the stabilization fund. But I do agree that it is important to have a healthy stabilization fund.
Very good. So moving on, the next question will be to Ms. Noseworthy. Retail has been a driving force in Leominster's tax base for many years. With the continued growth of online shopping and the continued decline of brick and mortar retail, what sector of the economy do you believe Leominster should be focused on going forward, and what will you do to support those efforts?
Sure, and thank you for that question. I think that two areas. I think that we should look both to manufacturing as well as to the biotech industry. I think that we have an award-winning Chamber of Commerce, that we have a lot of great relationships with them, but I know that we also don't pitch in as much necessarily as Fitchburg does. And I think we need to deepen and strengthen those relationships to work with them. There's a reason why they were voted by their peers, right? #1 in the country, to strengthen those bonds. So for example, my son goes to CTEI. He's in advanced manufacturing, but he already is employed by Nipro and Clinton. Obviously that's Clinton, not Leominster, but that CTEI has that connection with Nipro. And I think we can do a lot more with that to provide feeders into both manufacturing as well as into biotech if we, again, deepen those connections and our commitments to the Chamber of Commerce.
Councilor Angelini.
Well, thank you, Kevin. As I'm sure you're aware, being in the real estate business, that retail malls have taken a hit. Online shopping has changed the landscape in retail, and as we see the valuation of these malls that were once an anchor of our tax base are are slowly slipping away. So for years, I was an advocate as well of trying to attack biotech, good paying jobs, clean jobs to Leominster. And I think we held on to that land. We had an industrial development board at one time. I remember Dennis Roser, I think, was the chairman of that. And we held on to that land, zone industrial, for an awful long time. And it finally went to a mall up at the old Derby Farm. So I can tell you from someone who works with a lot of industry here in Leominster that warehouse space is at a premium. It's very, very difficult to find warehouse space. A couple buildings have just opened up, but Leominster is obviously a very attractive location due to our central mass, close to 190, close to Route 2, and it gives us a distinct advantage. You see the FedEx and the Amazon distribution centers are getting a little bit closer, looking for space in the area, and I think that's going to be a trend of the future. So we have to be flexible. We have zoning set up to accommodate mixed use, to accommodate industry. We have a village district, and I think we are in a great position to accommodate all types of business, and we have a reputation of treating businesses well, working with them, helping them develop, and I think that's something that should continue.
Okay. If either of you have anything else to add on this subject, we'll open it up for up to 5 minutes.
I'm all set,
we're
thank
good.
you.
All right, so the next question will go to Councillor Angelini. How do you see the state of education in Leominster? Where do we excel and where do we need improvement?
Well, thank you, Kevin. First, let me talk about where we excel. In fact, just recently, I looked at a report, students graduating from Leominster High School, going into 2- and 4-year state colleges, either community colleges or UMass's and Fitchburg States. We are exceeding the state average in that category. We're exceeding the state average in our technical education program as well. 24% above the state level as far as those kids going out and finding jobs and apprenticeships once they complete their vocational education. So, and importantly, military service as well. So those, I think we're demonstrating, we have, the superintendent, her team, the teachers at particularly the high school, but also our middle schools, our elementary schools, are committed. They do a great job. We have been awash in cash, as you may be aware. Federal government, the state throwing an awful lot of money at education after the COVID pandemic. And I think our superintendent and her team have used the money wisely. We've invested in technology. We've done improvements to air quality in several schools. And at some point, though, that money will run out. But the next 3 years, we're looking at $10 million additional funding for schools. And that's going to put us on a really good trajectory to the future. As I stand here today, the things I'm trying to do, working with the mayor's team, working with the city council, it's for the next generation. I mean, I'm getting a little long in the tooth, so the work we're doing today is going to benefit the youngsters, and I find that really a rewarding experience, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Noseworthy.
Great, thank you. I think that Leominster Public Schools has done a great job at stepping up to the challenge of dealing with what COVID brought. And before we started having that ARPA money and everything else coming in, right, we had to deal with whether kids were going to be at school, deal with supporting teachers and staff and everyone else. And we made it through, and we made it through the toughest of times, especially sort of coming off a few years where we did lose a lot of teachers. So what I think we're good at, I think we're really great at resilience, and I think we're really great at being very resourceful. We've got great teachers, we've got dedicated staff, but an area, like I said, that we want to work on moving forward is making sure that we don't lose all of the gains and the momentum that we've gotten. It's not that money solves everything. I've spent almost 15 years of my life advocating for Leominster Public Schools at City Council and School Committee for equitable access. I think we do a great job, we've got a great football team, but we've also got great academics. We've got a great theater program. My son does chorus and show choir. I think what we do great at is, Paula Deacon and her team have done a great job making sure every kid knows that they're important. LCE, all of the different ways and programs we have for people to graduate and excel is fantastic. But like I mentioned with the other question, I just want to make sure that not just with fiscal planning, but just generally speaking, that we make sure we haven't lost all the momentum that we've picked up.
Does anyone want? Go ahead.
Sure, Kevin, I would like to. I think it's important to note as well that, some of the buildings that our kids are learning in right now were built in the late 50s, early 60s, Northwest School in Fallbrook's even a little dated. I'm a member of the Fallbrook School Building Committee, and right now we're in that phase where we have to demonstrate to the state the merits of building new construction as opposed to rehabbing the existing structure. And of course, these schools generally have asbestos tile. They're not energy efficient. They're not conducive to learning. And I think we have a real opportunity at Fallbrook to build an energy efficient building that takes in the beautiful environment where that location is. We've got a wonderful parcel of land there to work with. But it's a shame. We're probably going to spend $2 million doing the analysis on tear down, new construction versus rehab. And I think that's a flaw in the process. I think that money would be better spent, letting the folks who work in the building, the maintenance folks who have to fix the furnaces that keep breaking down, the leaky roofs, let those folks make the decision what's more prudent, either building new or rehabbing.
I will sort of concur and expand on the fact that I think that infrastructure and long-term, building planning is an area that we can improve upon. Obviously we decided to build upon what, existed at the high school and rehab the parts that we needed to fix. I do believe that air quality reports and things came out from Fallbrook to sort of dictate the point that I believe it sort of is kind of in a space where they would have to spend the money, to make a new building. And I think that that's difficult for taxpayers to hear. I would just encourage people, even those that don't have children, to recognize that whatever we put into our schools, we're going to get back, because when those individuals graduate, they're going to become Leominster residents, and it's worth the investment.
Are we good on this?
I think we are.
Yeah.
All right. Next, other than serving in or running for elective office, how have you been involved in volunteering for our community? And secondly, what in your background makes you well suited for this position? Ms. Noseworthy.
Sure, and thank you for that. Well, as I had said earlier, I've advocated for about 15 years plus for Leominster Public Schools. I pride myself on the fact that although I started out really advocating for my own children in special education, that I made sure that when I did go to City Council and school committee, that I advocated for everyone's kids, as I mentioned earlier. Whether your child's a football player, accessing special education, a theater kid, really coming at it with a very holistic and intersectional approach to success, and I pride myself on that. Did a lot of community organizing, made sure one of the things that we advocated for was keeping William James Interface Referral Service within the schools, which is a service that allows anyone in Leominster who is adult or a child to access a free service when they're looking for an outpatient therapist. After that, I was a volunteer for emergency management, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in my closing. But I really pride myself on that. I am a veteran, so I really did enjoy the work that I did with emergency management with the various directors over the years. And from there, I was a trustee at the library. And since then, during even just the last few months, I have done a lot of advocacy to keep labor and delivery in Leominster. I was present at almost every event. I testified for when the Department of Public Health held their hearings. Again, I showed up whenever I could to hold signs, reached out to our state representative and did all I could to, through social media and word of mouth, to, do all I could to, advocate for equitable access to health care, and was personally impacted by the floods, but started in my own neighborhood and moved out to make sure that people were signing up for FEMA, that I was connecting them with the mayor's office or emergency management, and making sure that I was hitting all the people who didn't have access to social media.
Councilor Angelini.
Well, thank you. Well, I started out my volunteer work at the Perkins School. I worked with developmentally delayed kids as a Boy Scout leader, and it was a really rewarding experience, but very challenging as well. And as you know, Kevin, this one, I know you will recall.
Those were the
I
days.
became an advocate for clean drinking water back when Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority had planned an industrial park directly across the street from No-Town, the city's primary drinking water reservoir. That battle went on. It was a collaborative effort from a lot of folks working really hard, and it culminated in a victory. Senator Antonioni was able to find an earmark. The land was purchased from the Redevelopment Authority by Fisheries and Wildlife, and that land is now permanently protected. And it acts as a significant and very important buffer to our water supply. I dovetailed off of that and became a member of the Governor's Council on Smart Growth, the Smart Growth Working Committee, and got involved with the Leominster Land Trust as a board member and eventually the executive director. We had a vision. We saw what happened at No-Town. Leominster was being developed. I mean, each year more and more land was disappearing. And we recognized the Monoosuc Hills were under attack. There was a former NFL hockey player named Tom Williams. He and his partner were going to do a big subdivision at the end of Granite Street. That would have allowed another development. The first 70 homes would have enabled another 50. And before you know it, we would have had the Monoosuc Hills covered with homes, and we would have lost another significant buffer. But instead, we've gained a tremendous recreational opportunity, passive recreational opportunity, in a trail system that extends from the Leominster-Fitchburg line to the Leominster-Sterling line at Shoalin Farms. So I'm almost out of time, so I think I'll wrap it. Thank you.
Okay, we're heading into, we're coming up hard against closing statements, so just I'm going to have one last question and give you each 1 minute to answer, okay?
Sure.
Leominster has had the same mayoral administration for 30 years, so we've had plenty of time to make assessments. Do you agree with the direction of the city? Why or why not, Councilor Angelini? 1 minute? 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Well, I must confess, when I was first elected to this position 4 years ago, I was a bit apprehensive, the fact that I had to report all constituent complaints through the mayor's office. But I became a believer because Michelle Nadeau, who handles those constituent issues, does a tremendous job. Department heads have been wonderful in responding to my constituents' needs in a very timely manner, and I couldn't be more happy with the way things function. Yes, the Charter Commission, several decades ago, when the revised charter was adopted, it gave the mayor a great deal of power. And I questioned that at the time as well. But now I realize as a city councilor, there are 9 of us, and if we're all trying to get the department head's attention and make our point to that department head, the department head will never get any work done. So I think this system that's in place now is extremely efficient and it benefits the constituents.
Good. Ms. Noseworthy.
Sure, thank you. I think the mayor has done a lot of great things for our city. I especially appreciate the rail trail. I think what I would like to do moving forward, and part of why I'm running, is to be a more vocal advocate, just to make sure that we build on what we have. As I mentioned earlier, the mayor did a really great job with being on social media, for the flood and getting all the information out, which we all very much appreciated. But one of the things I would like to do and that I would bring to the council is I would like to also make sure that we're reaching out to those who aren't on social media. A lot of people either choose not to be or don't have access to it. So there are certain areas that he does a great job in that I'm just looking to expand upon, and equitable access to communication and safety are 2 of those areas.
Very good. Closing statements, 3 minutes. Ms.
Sure.
Noseworthy.
Thank you. I would first like to thank Flap TV, LTV, and FATV for this opportunity to connect with the voters in Ward 5 in Leominster. and say that I appreciate the importance of debates and the function they serve as part of the democratic process. As a veteran, my unwavering sense of service and duty is ingrained in who I am. My first call to serve in our community came from being a mother of children with special needs. I advocated for my boys, learning special education law, how public education worked and was funded, which led to helping other families understand how to advocate for their children, which grew into community organizing and advocacy for equitable access to education for all children in the Leominster Public Schools citywide for over a decade. As a volunteer for emergency management, I helped to conduct autism training for volunteers, assisted when families served had a loved one with a disability. I was trained in psychological first aid and helped to establish a protocol for survivors of fires. After that, I became a trustee of the library, where I participated in the hiring of a new director and worked on their strategic plan shortly after I earned my master's in public administration at Suffolk University. As your Ward 5 City Councilor, I will work each day to earn your vote, your trust, and your confidence. I will also work to contribute to a culture of mutual respect on the council. I was personally impacted by the 9/11 floods and know what it means to be impacted by a disaster, and will continue to bring my skills to bear for other constituents impacted by the flooding. I will take these experiences, my problem-solving and advocacy skills, to the council to prioritize equitable access to public safety, public education, and work towards securing fiscal sustainability for our current and future residents. I work to advocate every step of the way to keep the essential service of labor and delivery in Leominster, and I will continue to bring my passion and tenacity to work for each of you. I will prioritize transparency, clear communication, and responsive constituent services, and I respectfully ask for your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Angelini.
Thank you, Kevin. In closing this evening, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you, Kevin, and all the folks at FLAP TV. This is a wonderful service you're doing for the community. I think if we had more engagement from the public, the more engagement you have, the stronger your community. So you're doing a real service, and we thank you. Folks know me for the last 4 years. My constituent service record, I think, is impeccable. I respond immediately. I think it's important to note that before I was a city councilor, I was a constituent. And over the 35 years I've been at my home on West Street, I've had a couple of issues to deal with. And I wasn't really impressed with the lackluster response that I received. So I know what it's like to be ignored. I know what it's like to be frustrated with city departments not fulfilling what you believe is their responsibility. And so I try to bring that to my position as the Ward 5 City Councilor. Folks often tell me, I can't believe you called me back so quickly, or I can't believe you resolved this problem so quickly. I can't take credit for that. I can only share it with the mayor's office and their team, Michelle, and all the department heads who respond so promptly to the needs of my constituents. And for that, we are grateful. Folks have known me from my time at the Conservation Commission. I served at the pleasure of 3 mayors. I was the interim conservation agent for the city when John Richardson left. And I went on to the Leominster Land Trust, serving on the board, then as their executive director for a number of years. We accomplished a lot. We protected land that will be providing recreational opportunities and water supply protection in perpetuity. And that's something, one of the things I'm most proud of from my work that I've done in the city of Leominster. I would respectfully ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 7th. Pete Angelini, number 1 on the Ward 5 ballot. And I want to thank you all for listening and for participating in tonight's debate. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, and that concludes this debate for Leominster Ward 5 City Council with the candidates incumbent Peter Angelini and challenger Carrie Noseworthy. The election is November 7th. Thank you.